Probably say live stream, now streaming on live. I think that we are ready. So Reggie, welcome. I'll put you on spotlight. And thank you so much for joining us. And tell us a little bit about your campaign, and then we'll have some Q&A.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good evening, everyone. So great to be with everyone from Ward 4. My name is James Reginald Colimon, aka Reggie, for family and friends. And I hope that by the end of this evening, by the end of my campaign, you will consider me as your family and friend if you so choose. Therefore, feel free to call me Reggie as well. It's great to see so many familiar faces, and thanks to my team for being there. Familiar faces, I'm referring to Councilor Flynn. Thank you for being here, Councilor Flynn, and many others. As a proud immigrant who left the beautiful Caribbean island of Haiti as a teenager to join my parents in Boston over 35 years ago, I came to this country, like many before me, in search of opportunities for a better life. For many immigrants, transitioning into a new life in this country is financially, socially, and emotionally difficult. I come from a well-educated family and of modest means, but that did not shield me from my first experiences of discrimination, racism, and bullying, experiences that were totally foreign to me, but also made me tougher and more resilient. I have had the privilege of working closely with 3 great Boston mayors that love their cities. Therefore, I am running because there are many pandemics within the pandemic, whether it's healthcare disparity, racial inequities, barriers to economic opportunities, the opioid crisis, gender equality, climate injustice, and much more. I'm running for City Council because I believe that with more equitable policies and wider access to opportunities, our city, our people can reach new heights. Our kids are graduating high school without the basic knowledge of financial literacy right now. Their reading comprehension is inadequate. Basic city services are declining. The opioid crisis, as you know, did not go away. It was simply swept under the rug during the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. Needless to say, we are facing many challenges in our beautiful cities. By listening to voices across our communities, I will help shape policies tailored to specific needs. I will work tirelessly with my colleagues in the council and external partners throughout the city and beyond to propose legislation and deliver top-notch services to all of our residents. I am uniquely positioned to hit the ground running as a city councilor on day one. I have had the privilege, as I mentioned earlier, to work with several great American mayors, including Mayor Menino, Mayor Walsh, well, Secretary Walsh now, Mayor Janey, and Mayor Dyer in Orlando, where I work with close to 400 neighborhood associations. In particular, I proudly serve as Mayor Walsh, well, Secretary Walsh, liaison to the Boston City Council for 3 years. In that role, I spent countless hours every week working alongside all the 13 members of the council and their staff, as well as the council's central staff. You will find no other newcomer in this race who has the depth and breadth of understanding and real-world experience with the Boston City Council. I learn something new from everyone I meet. Underlying all of our work will be the efforts to eradicate the inequities limiting the ability of Bostonians to achieve their full potential. These inequities can be found in healthcare, as I mentioned to you earlier, opportunities to purchase or rent a home, education, the law, the economy, how to respond to climate change, 911 dispatch calls, addiction and recovery, LGBTQ right plus, and beyond. I don't claim to have the answers to all of these, but as a councilor at large, I'm running my campaign on a 6-point platform. One is access to opportunities, education, re-energize our vocational training program, shifting the narrative and reassessing how we appraise vocational training, programs for minorities, police officers, including making sure that our police officers mirror the communities they are serving, and also starting a program for minority kids, Blacks and Browns, that want to go into law school. making sure that they have paid internships so that they can be exposed to the law itself. Public safety, when it comes to domestic violence, everyone should feel safe wherever they call home. Access to technology, bridging the gap of technology that is widening right now, especially during the time of the pandemics. Kids that are doing their homeworks that do not have reliable internet access, and our aging population that is, we hear a lot about telehealth. What is telehealth to them? They don't even know what it is. For some, they don't have reliable access to the internet. They need to know how to work a computer when they have to have the privilege of seeing their doctor from in their living room. A global economy for Boston. Needless to say, we are a global city where 1 out of every 4 Bostonians was born somewhere else, which is about 28% of our population. Yet, when you look at the formal partnerships we have in the city, we don't have any in the Caribbean, any in the South America, any in North America, nor Latin America. So I want to make sure that our partnerships reflect the city that we have. And lastly, access to the basics. Basics. When talking to people on while I'm collecting signatures to get me on the ballot, a lot of people are telling me that basic city services are declining. We want to make sure that people are at the center of what's happening in our city. Make sure that we respond to their services as soon as they call, making sure that they know how to access the city services. I know that, as I mentioned, that I don't have the answers to everything, but I also know that no matter how small you are, you can always make a difference. This is why I adopted the following African proverb as my motto in almost everything I do in life. If you think you are too small to make a difference, try sleeping in a closed room with a mosquito. That is an African proverb that I always admire. Thank you, Jonathan. I'm looking forward to answering any questions you may have.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Floor is now open for questions. Feel free to either ask them directly, unmute yourself when you do, or put them into the chat. Nobody has one. I'll start off with a question to feed the ground. So one of the big things that will be on the agenda for the next for the city council thing that comes in January 2022 will be how we kind of continue that work, continue that work of like an equitable recovery from the recession that we're in. What about COVID? What are some of the top things on your mind as you think about how Boston can make sure that we get on a more equitable footing on the other side of the situation we've been in over the past year?
Thank you, Jonathan. One of the things that in the midst of the pandemic, we had the result of a disparity study that was done, which confirmed what we knew all along. The minority community in Boston is not getting a fair share of city contracts. It's something that I've talked about before with others to make sure that we unbundle some of the contracts that are awarded to big companies. But I also hear that, well, the smaller companies are not getting those contracts because they're not prepared. So if they're not prepared, why shouldn't we do our job to make sure that they are prepared to get those projects, to get those contracts? And how do they know, helping them find out how they can find surety bond, for instance, insurance for their contracts, so they can't be left behind. Making sure that during the pandemic, many people have lost their jobs, jobs that will never come back. So we have to reassess what I mentioned earlier for our kids that are graduating from high school when it comes to vocational training. But why not include vocational training, for instance, in the community colleges that we have, Bunker Hill and Roxbury Community College? We have close to $4 billion coming up in the pipeline for infrastructure. Let's prepare those kids or those people that love their job for the jobs of tomorrow.
and then I have a question in the chat. I have a question in the chat, a raised hand, and then another question in the chat that I'll do in that order. From Ben Siegel asking about, so the revenue for the city of Boston is heavily dependent on property taxes. What would you do to try to help diversify the income stream for the city so that it's not just so reliant just on property tax alone?
I totally agree. I feel that we have to be innovative. That's one of the things in my campaign. We have to find other ways to diversify our income stream. And I think that, for instance, one of the things that I would like to see, perhaps for seniors that have homes that rely on their homes that cannot pay the property taxes, we should first and foremost perhaps give them a lenience into paying that property taxes. But when it comes to other income stream, perhaps we might look into the parking meters that are right now that are not being operated on. We have a dynamic pricing that we started as a pilot, and I don't know where that is right now, but perhaps that's one way to look into that, to see how we can enforce dynamic pricing in other places, and also to make sure that we look into IDP for, to find ways that we don't always go back to the same revenue streams, just like, property taxes. And the other thing is perhaps when it comes to housing, we can either have companies that are big developers to help out more on that stream, and then but leave the smaller landlords out of that.
Kim.
Hi, Reggie. Thanks for being here with us today. My question to you is you've been working for mayors in a city with a strong mayor system. And so what has your experience as a council liaison given you in terms of your thoughts on the powers and the influence that the city council has that makes you want to seek a city council seat?
Good job.
Thanks for your question, Kim. This is a great question. As we all know, we know that most of the power for the council is voting on the city's budget. What I'd like to see the council be more proactive in the city's budget, and not only advocating for, I'm talking about the district councilors, Councilor Flynn perhaps can attest to that, not only for advocating for their district, but also to make sure that the city's budget reflects the entire city of Boston, to make sure that we have a say before the mayor share his or her budget with us in the near future.
It's nice to see you. Thank you. You came to me, I didn't realize who you are.
If you're not speaking, can you mute yourself? Mute yourself, please. So I have a question from Jane, asking about what would you like to see the city? What would you be advocating for the city to do about the opioid crisis, specifically with kind of the intersection of Mass Avenue and Mejia Cass being a major epicenter in the city, kind of the issues around addiction and homelessness?
Thanks. Did you say Jane, Jonathan? Sorry.
Yeah, the question was from Jane.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that question. As I mentioned in my opening statement, the opioid crisis did not go away, but took slightly a back seat during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I feel that Mejia Cass and Mass Ave and that area from the South End and Back Bay should not be experiencing what they're experiencing right now. I feel that we have to work, it has to be a regional approach solution. It cannot be, the burden should not be on the city of Boston alone. And we have to make sure that we work with other elected leaders from the surrounding towns. And I know that, for instance, the town of Quincy sued us again at the state level to make sure that we don't reopen Long Island with the construction of the bridge, which I think will be part of the solution, Long Island is a major part of the solution. I would say a big band-aid that would stick for now. But at the same time, I feel that we have to think more outside of the box. We have to have innovative answers and solution to eradicate or perhaps have a better solution for that crisis. And perhaps we have to think perhaps safe consumption site might be a solution, and others are doing it. And I know that those that are doing it have found that, there's less, the crisis has diminished. We have less overdose, and people eventually get back on their feet, and so they can be productive members of society.
So I have a question from Lisa Graff asking if you support a fully elected school committee, or kind of what's your thoughts on, because we currently have an appointed school committee. There have been a push to bring back elected seats, whether we have a fully elected or hybrid. What is your thoughts on the ideal version of school committee governance in the city?
Thank you for that question. I feel that it should be perhaps a hybrid model. Hybrid model simply because of the fact that if you have an elected body, some might be left out. I'd like to see some appointed, some elected. For instance, I'd like to see someone from, again, Boston is a majority minority city. We have to have people from all walks of life in that community that have an interest in the education system. But by having a hybrid model, we want to make sure that those that are being appointed represent Boston, perhaps a member of the LGBTQ plus community, diverse people from different race and background, and also have some elected.
Great, thank you. I have another question from Jane, who is asking about, so last year there was the ballot initiative around ranked choice voting that did not succeed statewide, but Boston voters did overwhelmingly support it. And would you support a home rule for the city of Boston to have a ranked choice system for municipal elections?
Yes.
Great, thank you. And then what do I have? One more question that I have from the chat is, so one issue that the city has faced when it comes to affordable housing is the definition of area median income that's used in the city is defined as the kind of the metropolitan area. And so the median kind of income ends up not being just Boston. It ends up including, let's say, like Wellesley and Newton and Brooklyn, places that are much more affluent than the city of Boston. And there's been a recent push to change what that measure that the city uses for in our housing work to better reflect the income and income disparity in the city of Boston. What are your thoughts on that, and especially how we can make sure that we're providing affordable housing opportunities to all folks in the city?
Thank you for that question. I feel that when it comes to housing, affordable housing, there's a bulk of the population that does not benefit from it all. When I speak with people from young people that are graduating college or with a master's degree, they cannot even afford a housing in Boston. So we're losing talents. We have to make sure that we adopt other measures to incorporate the pool of people that are looking for affordable housing in Boston. Furthermore, I feel that affordable housing should be not only in certain part of the city, because that furthers segregation. We need to have affordable housing in all parts of Boston, whether it's the waterfront, whether it's Beacon Hill, whether it's Dorchester, well, the places that can afford to have affordable housing right now.
Thank you. And I have a question in the chat about the Hispanic budget. So that's been a hot button issue last year as well as this year. What are your thoughts on what the city should be doing when it comes to what our approach to public safety should be? Any kind of thoughts? I know that you mentioned that public safety is one of your key points. What are your thoughts on that about whether the city should reallocate money away and some of the other issues stemming from that?
Well, when it comes to public safety, the police have to mirror the population they are serving. regardless to the fact that there are a lot of issues nationwide when it comes to policing, the city of Boston has done a good job, partly when it comes to policing our communities, policing our working with the communities. But I feel that we need to do a better job as the way they are trained. Not every call should be directed to 911, or if it does, it should be somewhat having other people to be, included in that call, whether it's just someone that has a background in social work, a social worker, or someone that is mentally unstable. We have to make sure that these people are dispatched with the police wherever they are, depending on the gravity of the situation. I, as an immigrant, as a Black man, I've had several instances with the police where I was stopped for no reason. I would say racial profiling, stereotyping. I have an accent, but I do not think with an accent. I want to make sure that the police that are policing our neighborhood, our communities, are aware of all these issues. And look at what happened to that young lady the other day. She was the one that called the police, allegedly. Then again, she was killed, perhaps so, legally, rightly so. But however, we need to make sure that our police, not only they are here to protect and serve, we need them. However, we need to do a better job to make sure that the funding that goes to them is incorporates some of the other training, such as how to respond to calls that do not warrant using force.
Great, thank you so much. I think that I've gone through all of the questions that I think people have. I can give one more question if somebody has it, or if not, I will send our thanks and transition to the next speaker. So if there's any final questions, once, twice. Well then, thank you so much for joining us. If you can you put in the chat, people want to learn, if people want to learn more about your campaign or get involved, where they should go, your website, social media, or campaign contacts, always appreciated.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you to Ward 4. Thank you to everyone for listening. And I'm looking forward to your endorsement. And then I'm putting the link to my website in the chat, in my personal cell phone as well. If you guys have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me personally. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can we have a round of applause for our speaker? Great. So, well, next up, we have State Representative Jon Santiago. Welcome, Jon. I'll put you on spotlight in a sec.
Good afternoon, folks.
Let me find you in here to formally put you on spotlight.
Folks, hear me? Am I on the?
Yes. Okay. I was going to spotlight you during the part where we have you. So go kind of
sure.
Take a few minutes, introduce yourself, talk about the campaign, and then we'll go to Q&A.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jonathan, for the invitation, and thank you to my many Ward 4 friends and supporters in the past that have been fundamental in my growth as a person, as a physician, as a neighbor of the South End and Roxbury, and as a state representative. I often say that when I'm at Ward 4, I feel like I'm at home. It's where I first got my start in politics and where I learned how to door knock, phone call, get involved in politics. So thank you for the grassroots work that you do on the ground, and for what you continue to do, because you and I and everyone on this phone, I imagine we're all probably on the same boat with respect to what we think about what's at stake in this current election. And I would argue, and I think many of you would as well, that this is likely to be the most consequential election in our city's history. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, the city's experienced its fair share of difficult times, whether we're talking about a busing crisis in the 1970s, which really pitted neighborhoods against one another, or we're talking about a pre-COVID Boston. For those of you who know, I represent a number of precincts in Ward 4, and from Copley Square to Nubian Square, pre-COVID, there was a 30-year life expectancy difference. And, that was done within a 30-minute walk, 30 years in a 30-minute walk. So suffice to say, the city of Boston's been through a lot, but today's challenges, I would argue, are at a whole different level. I mean, they're much more complicated, they're bigger in nature. And what I've often been saying about COVID since the beginning of the pandemic is that what COVID has done is it's essentially taken the lid off these inequities. It's exposed them for those of us who aren't paying attention, and it's exacerbated them. And so I'm running for Boston for one clear reason. That's to bring Boston back stronger than ever, but to make sure that that recovery, which I would argue will be the most difficult part, is rooted in two things: equity and opportunity. Because I think this moment right now in the city of Boston demands leadership and public service experience and someone who's committed to getting things done. And I've done that my whole life. As a Peace Corps volunteer working for 2 years in the Dominican Republic, serving the most vulnerable communities, has a position in the emergency room at Boston Medical Center where I still work today, as a captain in the Army, and as a state representative representing some of you on this phone call today. My life has really been about getting things done. But to be very clear, as difficult as the past 14, 15 months have been, the real challenge is going to be the next 2, 3, 4 years and what comes of that. But at the same time, I also look at that as one heck of an opportunity. I mean, we're going to have hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government to really begin to reset, rethink, reshape about how we go in terms of addressing our most persistent and problematic issues. And to me, I look at that as an important opportunity. And for me, I see a better Boston. I see a bolder Boston. I see a more beautiful Boston. I see a more equitable Boston. I see one where every child in the city will get that world-class education that they deserve. I see Boston where all this growth that we're seeing across the entire city is benefiting everyone equitably. I see a Boston where this opioid crisis that many of you on this phone have experienced down the street on Mass and Cass is finally addressed, not with just decentralization of services, but with a true pathway to recovery. You know, I want the city of Boston to know that their mayor is fighting for them each and every day, and I'm committed to doing that. And I know that's a lot to ask for a mayor, but I'm committed to doing that because I know the challenges. I see them every day in the emergency room, working there, you know, the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. I see them as a state representative who's quite active, walking the neighborhood. But I know these issues at a very personal level. And I know some of you know my personal story. And for those of you who don't know, I'll take a second to explain it. I was born in Puerto Rico. We came to Boston with a family of 6 in search of opportunity. My father came here to graduate college. He went to school full time at night, worked during the day. My mother took ESL classes at UMass Boston. And although we lived in Roxbury on Woodland Street, you know, I always knew if you worked hard, if you dreamed big in Boston, good things can happen. But it's also been a place of tragedy for my family. It's where my uncle became infected with HIV, ultimately passing from AIDS. And his only issue was that he was a poor man who could not access healthcare. To me, this struck me as a young person as unjust, not right, and something had to be done. So at that moment, I decided to dedicate my life to public health medicine and serving those most vulnerable. And so I spent the next 5 years abroad after college, you know, as a Peace Corps volunteer working in Latin America, in Africa, and Europe. And I came back 10 years ago. My family had left the city of Boston. They had left the state, actually. I moved back to Boston because these were my first memories, and this is where my life started in terms of, you know, understanding that, you know, the future and opportunity can happen in Boston. So I moved back with $70 in my wallet, crashed at a friend's house, went to medical school, then I got my dream job at Boston Medical Center. And it's a job that I still have, and it's one that I love. And, you know, whether it's a heart attack, stroke, you name it, I love those moments where we have to make executive decisions and get things done. But what I've come to learn in my time working at Boston Medical Center, it's that why people show up in the ER, it's a direct reflection of what's happening in their respective communities. It's the poverty, the lack of education and economic opportunities that would ultimately manifest into some sort of medical emergency. So I don't care how many lives I've saved, how many overdoses overturned, people will still keep on coming back to a place like BMC because the root issues, something I call the social determinants of health, have not been addressed. So 2018, as some of you are very well aware, I decided to make a run for office, feeling that I could represent my community better. And, you know, wasn't really giving a shot in hell to win that campaign, but I personally knocked on thousands of doors, and over the course of that campaign, we won. And so for the past 2 or 3 years, I've been in the State House, and it's been an honor to work there and represent you on Beacon Hill. And I would argue being a part of one of the most productive and progressive legislative cycles in recent memories. You know, we passed a comprehensive moratorium on eviction. We passed some housing reform. We passed a landmark education bill. We expanded reproductive rights in women. We took on COVID-19 in a courageous way. And I'm very proud of that, you know, and I think my role in that was more than just the average first-term rep. That second year in my representative, my role as a state representative, not only did I double my hours in COVID-19, but the Speaker of the House asked me to serve on this COVID-19 committee to make sure that government was still running. And very excited about the work that we've done. A lot of work still to do, but excited about it nonetheless. And so after this past year, after coming back from a deployment, doubling up my hours in the ER during the second surge, and working in the State House, Marty Walsh got the tap to head to DC, and I got to think, how can I best serve my city, my neighborhood, my patients in a time of crisis, and again, in a crisis that has exacerbated the inequities that we live in. And 2.5 months ago, I decided to jump in this race for mayor because I thought I had the determination, the willpower, the work ethic to serve the city of Boston. And so we've been organizing across this entire city. Things are going quite well. We just submitted thousands of signatures. And I'm back to door knocking, listening, engaging with folks all across the neighborhood. We secured, 5 endorsements from the State House, from certain neighborhoods across the city of Boston. We secured some of the biggest labor unions in here, Local 223 just a couple of weeks ago in Dorchester, SEIU NAGE, broad coalition that we're building. And so we're taking that message across the city of Boston. We have 4.5 months till the end of this race, but I'm looking forward to engaging you all again in this race and asking for your support and learning. I think despite my many years in education and experiences across the entire world, I know what I don't know. And I'm here to work, partner, and engage you all to bring back Boston stronger than ever. So thank you for the invitation in Ward 4, and I look forward to sharing these next couple minutes with you.
Great, thank you so much. And for folks, I know some people have already put questions in the chat. Feel free to either unmute and ask your own question or put them into the chat. The first question in the chat is from Jane, asking how would you handle the scandals in the Boston Police Department? There have been a few of them recently, getting a lot of attention. What would be your response to that, and how that?
I think
I'll leave it at that.
Okay, well, I think you, John. I think you. Is that Jane or Janet that was asking that question?
Jane.
Jane. Good to hear from you, Jane. I think, first and foremost, you're talking about, I would imagine, I don't want to assume here, but talking about with the incident of the former police union president, Patrick Rose. And let me just say, I'm as outraged as anyone about this breach of public trust and abuse of the system. I think there's a code of silence in the police department that must be addressed with transparency, and committed to, as your mayor, to making sure that's done. 13 pages of a 100+ page document has been released. I don't see any reason why, we can't get more of that released to figure out why this person was able to continue in this position as not only continue his position, but to rise up the ladder there and remain as a police union, and so I'm committed to more transparency in the police department. But I think, your question also speaks to, how am I going to tackle or work with the police department? And I think, look, I have an interesting perspective on this because I carry 2 hats. I am a Puerto Rican person. I grew up in an urban part of town. I know what it feels like to be, stopped by a police car, searched illegally, thrown over a police car, intimidated by cops. It was a very, hello? Oh, sorry, my computer just cut off. As I was saying, I know what it feels like to be that person who felt like they were being over-policed, and it was an intimidating experience as a young man. But at the same time, there are some cops out there that do the job. I work with them each and every day in the emergency department. And just this past week, for example, after working 3 nights where violence is picking up across the city, I'm concerned that this particular summer will be a violent summer, given that the weather's picking up and given the social isolation that we've experienced, that they play an important role. What I want to see, and what I'm committed to as the mayor of Boston, is to make sure that we are reducing the demand on police today. When I see in the emergency department, cops bringing in folks suffering from mental health illnesses, from substance use, that quite frankly, they don't have to be involved with. And to be honest with you, in discussions with them overnight in the emergency department, they don't want to be a part of it. And so if we can come up with an important, and I think a comprehensive community crisis diversion program, which other cities across the country have done to decrease services, but at the same time provide appropriate resources and save money, it's implementing mental health clinicians and social workers and the like. I think we can be a successful model, not just for Boston, but to show the rest of the states how it's done here. And I'm committed to doing that.
Thanks. And then I see Ryan has his hand up.
Hi, thank you for joining us. It's good to see you.
Hey, Ryan.
Hey, you mentioned ensuring that growth and big developments will help the broader community, maybe more than they do today.
Yeah.
What are maybe 3 things that you would do as mayor to change that isn't being done today?
In terms of how do we make sure the development is more kind of equitably done? Well, I think a couple of things. I think when you look at the development, in Boston, I guess the question is, Ryan, in this race right now, listen, if I was happy with things, the way things are going right now, I wouldn't be in this race, right? But I'm not happy. I'm not happy with the housing. I'm not happy with the development. I'm not happy with the state of affairs when it comes to schools, right? And as the only candidate not from City Hall, I think those folks in City Hall could and should have been doing a better job in this. And so with respect to development, I believe very strongly that we should be fighting for more equitable, smart, and sustainable development that is community-centered and led. I would argue to you that we're still operating in our 20th century kind of rules, whether that's a zoning code that was created in 1965 or an Article 80 process that was created in 1995. I mean, we are working with outdated, antiquated tools, and it frustrates everyone. It frustrates the folks on the ground. It frustrates the developers as well. And I will tell you, Brian, as a state representative, I initially wasn't getting involved with development issues or city issues. The only reason why I got involved in a number of city issues as a state representative is because my community feel like they didn't have a voice, right? Either with the BPDA or with their local representative. So I got involved. And so whether that was stopping a poorly planned marijuana dispensary on Columbus Ave, right? Or whether that was working hand in hand with residents and businesses to really stop the sale of the Heinz. And I think you were probably at a meeting too there. I think if I can recall correctly, I think you were at the big meeting we had with respect to that.
Yep.
I made sure that those folks most impacted by this would be engaged in that. But I think and I think we've had this conversation in the past with respect to housing, right? And how do we make sure that Boston is living up to its potential with respect to how do we create more housing in the city of Boston? And I think we can do it. And I think it's important that we be innovative in terms of finding important financing mechanisms to get that done. To be honest with you, listen, when IDP or when passed the city council, I worked with my Boston delegation to increase that. It was the last day of budget, actually. We passed in the State House. But more importantly, I think it's critical and incumbent upon your leader, and I will as the next mayor of Boston, to think about important financing mechanisms to get things done, right? We have to somehow incentivize folks to develop the houses that we want to, whether that's transit-oriented housing, whether that's more affordable housing. And I think there's ways to do that, right? I think if you leverage, this is what I've been learning more about over the past couple of weeks. If you leverage our AAA bond rating, for example, right, to serve as a co-signer for low-income folks who want to get their first, purchase their first home, I think that's a possibility. Ryan, if I told you that the debt service right now is 5%, which is pretty good, right, in the year of COVID, the standard for a city like Boston, 7%. So theoretically, you could issue hundreds of millions of dollars of municipal bonding to developers to develop the type of housing that you and I want to develop, whether that's affordable, transit-oriented housing, and I'm committed to doing, and again, as a state representative, initially hesitant to get involved in this stuff at the local level, but I've had to get involved. Whether that's 715, 725 Tremont, making sure that those residents and those neighborhoods feel engaged, whether that's expanding that particular project, from 20 to 40, if we can get there. That was a project right in the South End on Tremont that was almost at the risk of getting flipped, right? And we helped to fight for those residents and make sure that the community had a voice at the table. But I think, making sure that we can leverage that AAA bond rating, something I was committed to doing. The other thing, I think the Office of Housing Stability, I would double down on investments and resources in that area. I think it's too late if we're talking about families that have already been evicted. And listen, I see them. Guess where they come to? They come to the emergency department. Did you know if you go to any pediatric emergency room in the state of Massachusetts, at night, you will care for families and their chief complaint is homelessness, right? And so I would argue and invest in a program that is much more proactive, right? That is having, quarterly assessments, interacting, engaging folks who are at risk of becoming evicted, displaced, and making sure that they have the resources and support in order to stay in their homes, because it's so much more difficult to, get someone back into their house once they're out, and I see that. And all you have to look at Mass and Cass, for example, the nexus of homelessness, substance use, and mental health illness to see what happens when you lose the housing. But I think in the year of COVID-19, it has become incumbent upon us to really understand that housing equals economic opportunity, housing equals health, and we're committed to making sure that we create, equitable housing across the city of Boston when we become the mayor of Boston.
Thank you.
So I know that I have a few other questions to get to into the chat, but since from somebody who just asked a question before, any other questions from people, and then I'll go to someone from the chat. Okay, so what specifics? So obviously one of the big issues in the South End is always the kind of the opioid crisis, especially with its manifestations at the center of Mass Avenue and Mejia Boulevard. What specific proposals would you want to implement as mayor in order to address addiction broadly, and specifically the case of Mass and Cass?
Great, no, thank you, John. Listen, like that is an incredibly complicated issue that I am committed to solving. Within my first term in office, and I think, and I strongly believe that I am the only one able to do this because I understand the issue from multiple dimensions. I live a block from Mass Ave. I work at the heart of this. If I walk to Mass and Cass right now, I can call out those people walking around because they're my patients. They come over, when they're overdosed or when they need a sandwich or when they need a place to sleep, right? And it's an incredibly challenging situation. Again, that is the nexus of homelessness, substance use, and mental health illness. I've been, the only candidate in this race who's actually done something about this and who's been quite active on this. The first thing I did in the legislature, well, not the first thing, but one of the most important things I did is I fought for funding. As a state rep, that's your job, to bring back funds, right? And when, first term reps are bringing in $25,000, $50,000, I made a convincing argument to the Speaker of the House and to the governor to tell the governor, listen, despite you passing two important opioid bills, there's a crisis brewing at Mass and Cass. And this was before the situation happened a couple of years ago. And as a result, we were able to find millions of dollars in the budget to give to City Hall so they could do something about it. Obviously the situation not going anywhere. It needs more than money. With that said, though, just this past budget session, which just finished last week, I fought for millions of more dollars for opioid for resources to combat substance use, and $2 million in one budget item that I proposed. So I think a couple of things. I think it's about you need a decentralization of services without a doubt. When I look at the problems at Mass and Cass, a big part of the solution is going to be decentralization. And we've heard about Long Island and we've heard about Shattuck Hospital, but I went to Quincy to go argue for that bridge. I went to Quincy at risk and got booed off the stage. And people weren't happy with me because I fought for the bridge there. And we're two lawsuits that have been nixed essentially by the DEP. So we're making our way there. I've also been leading on trying to get supportive housing to Shattuck. Secretary Sutters, obviously right before COVID, we had an agreement on the table to put, over 100, somewhere between 100 and 200, 100 beds there. COVID-19 happened, so that obviously was sidetracked. But my hope is that over the course of the next couple of months, as things improve with COVID-19, that we begin to that we bring back that program online to come up with a plan to address the decentralization of services, not just within Boston, but outside of Boston. And as the only candidate from the legislature, I have those relationships with the legislature and with the governor to think big about this. Already I've been in conversation before I was a candidate for mayor with local neighborhood towns and cities to look at, how can we build up recovery systems and pathways for people from Mass and Cass. I think when you look at the situation of Mass and Cass, there's a continuum of care, detox all the way to supportive housing. Some of the short-term housing, that's what we're short on, right? So I'm committed to making sure that we invest and we expand that in places like Long Island and Shattuck. And again, as the only candidate who lives down the block, who treats those patients, who's worked in this area, we have what it takes to get it done.
Okay, I'll go to one of the other questions that I had from the chat. So Boston is very, very reliant on property taxes as a source of revenue for the city. What are your thoughts about opportunities to diversify and increase the revenue stream for the city?
Well, I think
what you would like to do.
Great. Well, I think there are a couple of things. I think first, I've been fighting for more resources from the state government, and my hope is that we'll pass the millionaire's tax as soon as possible. But I think whether that's looking at pilot reform and making sure that those big institutions, those nonprofit institutions that are not have nonprofit status, means are paying their fair share. We're committed to making sure that they are paying their fair share in the city of Boston. But with respect to the families in the city, particularly the South End, that, helped create the fabric of the neighborhood. Listen, when I door knock in the South End, and I still do to this day, I speak to families who've been here for 30, 40, 50 years that helped create the social fabric of the neighborhood. And they feel they're at a place right now where they have two options. Do I sell my house and maybe make a lot of money, but I have to leave the neighborhood, a neighborhood that I helped create? Or do I stay here and risk, not able to put up the money? And, so I'm more than willing and have looked in ways that we can address, whether that's more abatements at the property tax level, certain exemptions for seniors and for people, for veterans and for other folks who might need that support. So very much committed to looking at that. But, in terms of looking at money to come in revenue, I think pilot is my first take at it.
Any other questions that folks have? Oh, Carol, do you want to ask your question? Oh, it's here. So COVID has taught us that maintenance of our urban parks is vital to our collective and individual well-being. How can the city work more effectively with DCR to ensure the health of our green spaces?
Well, and this is something that we've done. I think if you look at the Southwest Corridor Park, a lot of thanks to some of the work that Senator Brownsberger, myself, Ed Flynn's been involved as a city councilor, and Jay Livingstone. That park, literally not a year ago, about 6 months ago, all those lights were out. It wasn't being used as well as it could be. It was turning to some sort of drug haven, and we partnered and worked with DCR to make sure that all those lights were changed and that they were being kept up. Again, the question you have to ask yourself, Carol, is like, who is in the best position to fight for you when it comes to the state? And as a state legislator right now, who already has those relationships with DCR, to get things done, we're committed to doing it. I'll give you an example. Carol, you live in the Fenway. This is Carol Lasky we're referring to here. I don't know if there's other Carols. Okay, Carol Lasky.
There's another Carol on the call, but that's the one.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Carol Lasky, you're well aware of the issue with DCR and the Parker meter, the metered parking issue in the Fenway. And I don't know if you're aware what just recently happened this past week. We were working with or trying to get DCR to come to terms with what the neighborhood wanted to do. And a couple of weeks ago, I organized a petition. We sent to DCR, we worked with them, and they were still very difficult to communicate with. So last week we passed a budget amendment to say, listen, if DCR is going to implement some sort of metered parking, that they're going to go through the city of Boston, and the city of Boston is going to decide on what happens. And so we've given power back to neighborhoods to really reclaim their land, whether it's parking space or whether it's green space. And I'm committed to keeping doing that as your state representative, but also as the mayor of Boston, again, who has those relationships, who knows how to pull those levers, and knows how to get things done in the legislature.
I'd say that the big lesson from last week, Rep, is the power of collaborative action.
Yeah.
Because it has had a really good outcome for us, and we're all really happy about it.
Do you remember the first call we had about this?
Yes, I do.
We got I was in Kuwait still. We got nowhere, and then I said, the heck with this. Let's do the petition, which we started thanks to Fenway Civic Association, and many of you guys signed it. And then we came to DCR. They weren't, too fond of it, but I said, listen, we're going to take this. We're going to ratchet up this level. And it's the same thing we took when they tried to cancel Bus 43 in
Yes.
the South End, right? I did the same thing. We galvanized the neighborhood. I started calling MBTA, harassed them essentially. I said, listen, there are 500 people who think this is wrong on a whole host of different levels. And guess what? 43 never got canceled, right? And so as your mayor, we know how to pull those levers in the legislature. We have the relationships to get it done. And I'm committed to fighting for the city of Boston like nobody's business, to make sure that those folks are taken care of, and that we're gonna have the resources in here to make sure that this recovery, again, is rooted in equity and opportunity.
I could take one more question if we have one before we go on to the next speaker. If anybody has one, you can ask them. If not, we'll transition to the next. Going once, going twice. Oh, Mary, I see somebody saying that Marianne has a question. Marianne?
Harold has the question.
Okay.
Number one, John, it's really good to see you again and hear your very thoughtful perspectives. But I do have, hi, John. I do have two ongoing concerns, one of which is forever, and that is reaching some sort of equity in our school systems. We
Yeah.
all love Boston Latin, and we think it's such an exemplary high school.
Mhm.
But to me, that should be not the exception, but should be the standard in a
Yeah.
democracy. Every high school, every grade school should really be structured in means to which we can maximize, optimize the capacity of each and every child in our school system. That's my first question. My second is just a real concern about the current situation. I fear that the cities, as we know in New York, for example, 25% of office space has been vacated. That if you had any thoughts on what the implications of both technology and technology's influence on post-COVID implications on the city, both in terms of income and in terms of housing, and I think it's going to be very significant. People working at home works, apparently. I mean, you can't work at home.
Yeah.
But my recent doctor's appointments have all been online.
You can do a whole bunch of neurology consults online now. Yeah.
So there was a lot in that question. If you can answer, I'm going to keep the answer quick so that we can go to that.
I'll be quick, John.
Yeah.
With respect to your second question, I'm not bullish on the fact that people are going to stay home post-COVID. People have been saying, I'm going to venture to say that, we're going to have a return, post-COVID. The same people are going to be going to work, and you might see anywhere from a 5 to 10% decrease, I would argue. So I would imagine that more people are going to get back to work than we think they are. With respect to education, I couldn't agree with you more. Listen, education has been my lifeline. I was one of those poor minority kids who went to underfunded schools. It's the only way that I got out of my station in life. And I've seen it all. I've been to underfunded schools. I've been to community college. I've been to big public schools. I went to Yale School of Medicine, and it has been my lifeline, right? And I think what we need right now is more, not just investment, but innovation and incentives to get kids and to address that achievement gap. I think we're going to have one heck of an opportunity. We have $460 million coming in to address education. I think it's about time that we finally get to that deferred school maintenance that we saw was such an issue with COVID-19. And I want to be innovative about certain things, if there's a big difference between the Hurley School in the South End and the Blackstone, right? A half mile away from each other. There are a whole host of differences, but one big one that strikes out, that hits me hard and that is very obvious to anyone paying any attention, is the role of parent engagement. And so I would be very interested in investing in programs, in piloting programs that make sure that parents get more involved with their students. Yes, that's talking about paying parents to get more involved, because my parents couldn't get involved because they were always working, right? But if you paid them, if you incentivized them, I think they'd get involved, and I think the schools would benefit from that. Something I'd be very interested in doing as well is increasing the role of public-private partnerships. Harold, if it wasn't for a 5-week summer program I did when I was 19 that plucked poor Black and brown disadvantaged students out, introduced them to doctors and physicians, I wouldn't be a doctor today. So with all the competitive advantages that Boston has right now, all the biotech, life sciences, the arts here, we should be really doubling down on our commitment to the schools and making sure that we have robust partnerships that are comprehensive. And, I think that we will be a better school system for that. So sorry about that, Cone, if I ran out of time there.
Wow.
No worries, but thank you so much. If you could just drop it. I already see that Leah has put that in the chat. I was just going to ask people who want to learn more about the campaign to drop that into the chat, and I see that she already has. So thank you so much, and if we can get a round of applause for our speaker.
Thank you, everyone. I'll hopefully see you around. Don't hesitate to call me. I'll put my phone number in the chat.
Great, and now that I see that we have, she's here, Acting Mayor Janey. Kim, welcome. I'll put you on spotlight while you're speaking. We're giving everybody, all right. Oh, I have you as, it shows you as not on video right now.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, okay.
Can you see me?
Yes, now I can.
How are you guys?
Good. So talk for a little bit, and then some Q&A. So thank you so much.
All right. Listen, it's good to be with you. Really appreciate the opportunity. Miss seeing folks, obviously, in person. Grateful, though, to connect with Ward 4. As folks know, my name is Kim Janey. I'm mayor of the city of Boston. But let me tell you a little bit more about myself. I think most of you know, certainly my roots in Roxbury in the South End, having grown up in the city and a large family of educators, artists, entrepreneurs. and advocates in the city of Boston. Grew up in the 1970s and 80s. My great grandmother's brownstone on West Canton Street was just one street over from where Mel King lives, and so saw all of that activism as a young girl growing up in our city. I also saw how so many folks have been left out of the opportunity in the city of Boston. Much of the lessons that I took from my parents, my family, certainly the community that I grew up in and poured so much into me, I brought with me along the way, through right from the start as a young girl in school. My first experience in school was at a community school that was started by leaders in the Black community with support of the Jewish community, because Boston Public Schools was not doing a good job educating our kids. I did that for kindergarten and first grade. That gave me a firm foundation, not only in the basics in terms of academics, but in terms of having love and pride for who I was as a little Black girl. By second grade, I was in Boston Public Schools. By 11 years old, I was bused during the desegregation order in the 1970s, the second phase of that. But again, my parents fighting for me sought better opportunities for me than that pain and trauma of busing. And I ended up in a voluntary busing program called METCO by 8th grade and graduated from there. Was not able to go to college right away. I became a parent in high school, so I had to go to work. When I did go to school, eventually, I started at a community college and got involved in the Children's Defense Fund. And that's where I got trained as a community organizer. They brought together students from all over the country to train us in direct action organizing and civil rights movement history so that we could go out and start freedom schools. I was hired as a community organizer at a nonprofit called Parents United for Childcare, which sought to, help working parents, particularly mothers, in their quest for affordable quality childcare. At that time in the mid-1990s, childcare expenses were the second biggest expense outside of housing, still true to this day. By 2001, I joined Massachusetts Advocates for Children to work again for children and to advocate for systemic change, to eliminate the opportunity achievement gap and give greater voice to students and parents in decisions that impact their lives. All of these experiences contributed to my desire to advocate on issues all across our city and led me to run for city council, which I did in 2017, and was very proud to have the endorsement of Ward 4. I won that election, becoming the first woman to represent District 7, which includes Roxbury, South End, Dorchester, and Fenway on the city council. Shortly after that, in my next term, I was elected by my peers on the city council to serve as the council president and led the council through, one of the biggest issues facing all of us, certainly in our lifetime, in our generation, and that's the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as issues around racial justice. Those issues are not new for me. These are issues that I grew up with my whole life in my family and my community. It certainly did not take the murder of George Floyd for me to, care about these issues or to work on these issues. I've worked with them throughout my entire career. And after that year, beginning of this year, we all know that at the beginning of this year, President Biden chose then Mayor Walsh to become the United States Secretary of Labor. And now I became mayor of the great city of Boston, the first woman to serve in this role and the first Black mayor for the city of Boston, which is a big deal after 199 years of not having this kind of representation or leadership recognized in our city. Certainly a symbol of coming far, especially given the pool of candidates all people, mostly people of color, very talented. But clearly there's a lot more work to do. And now it's the beginning of my 7th week. We've done a lot already, hit the ground running on a number of initiatives and fronts, specifically as it relates to the pandemic and ensuring that people have equitable access to the vaccine. That has been a major issue throughout this pandemic and how it has disproportionately impacted communities of color, specifically the Latino community and Black community in terms of confirmed deaths, but also in terms of the cases. We've also seen the need to do much more in terms of equitably distributing vaccines that can save lives. We've done a lot in terms of getting the vaccine out and meeting people where they are in the neighborhoods, whether that is in senior housing, whether that's in community centers, whether that's in churches. And so we have now had some good data trending in the right direction, which is great. And I'm really proud that over the last couple of weeks, we have seen a decrease of 48%, and that we have now 61% of everyone over 16 have received at least one shot. But we know we have more work to do, particularly when we look at some of the neighborhood data and data by race. Of folks who are fully vaccinated, almost half of those are people of color. And so that is a good thing, but we need to do more, which is why in my very first week as mayor, I launched a vaccine equity grant of $1.5 million to partner with community-based organizations that have relationships that are trusted, where people could get the information they need, make informed choices, and get access to the vaccine. Also launched the Hope campaign, which features an array of people of color of all different races and ethnicities, in different languages featured in the campaign, again, to try to make sure we are reaching people where we are. Certainly important, since I'm on the Zoom, and I will point out the importance of continuing to wear face coverings, even though the CDC and others are saying we can let some of that go. We know it works, and we should continue to do what will protect ourselves, protect our families and our communities. I also launched in my very first week housing grant, a housing fund of $50 million, because so many of our residents have been impacted by COVID-19. We know that COVID has only served to expose and exacerbate pre-existing inequities, that there was a housing crisis before COVID, that there were health disparities before COVID. Certainly from Symphony Hall to Grove Hall, there's a life expectancy gap of 30 years. Certainly there are gaps in terms of education, opportunity gaps. We all know of the wealth gap in Boston and growing income inequality that contributes to that. And so these issues are issues that need to be addressed with urgency. And so for me, there is no going back to normal. I know we all want to get on with our lives and do things that we enjoy, and we can certainly do things that bring us joy, and hope that we will be intentional with our joy agenda, but we cannot go back to normal. We can only go better. We need to create a stronger Boston, and a Boston that is more equitable, more just, and more resilient. That is my focus as mayor. That is the work that I hope to do with all of you moving forward. Certainly hope to earn your endorsement and ultimately your votes on September 21st and on November 2nd. I'm happy to take a couple of questions, and hope that you will forgive me as I go off camera to transition, but I am listening and will be right with you.
Great. I see questions from Ben and Jane Siegel, and then a question from Aaron D. So Ben and Jane.
Will you read it, Jonathan?
Oh, the last one there. The question was about Question from Jane asking about your stand on the police union spat with city councilor and fellow mayoral candidate Andrea Campbell, as well as on calls for her to drop out of the race because of your holding the seat currently.
Give me just 1 second. I'll be right with you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Whew. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me get my glasses so I can see. So on the union issue, very disturbing. Certainly, spoke up. I think those attacks are certainly uncalled for. They should not be tolerated. This is not new. This is something that has been happening, particularly to Black women in particular, certainly women of color. And it was important to stand together against those attacks. And so I certainly spoke out, do not condone those in the least. Andrea is someone that I've worked with, have a lot of respect for, and don't ever want to see anyone going after women in general or Black women in particular. As it relates to any emails of pushing people out, deeply offended. I was bothered by that when that happened in 2013. I think it is.
I think you froze.
Hey, John, what are you doing now?
Yeah, that is her end freezing, right? I'm always worried that it's me. Frozen, I'm just not seeing it.
That's technology for you.
Hopefully she's able to, I think that she just left and she's probably going to rejoin.
Are you guys still there?
Yeah,
just
thank you.
I don't know what just happened. Could you hear me? Anyway, I am not a fan of anybody trying to push people out of this race or any other race for that matter. I think it's I'm offended and I don't agree with it. I didn't like it in 2018 when people complained about the DA's race. I didn't like it in 2013 in that mayor's race. We have, if anything, 2018 should put all of that to rest when there were 3 women running and 3 people of color running and a lot of fears about votes being split up. And ultimately a woman was successful in that race and a Black woman was successful. So we should not be trying to push anyone out of the race.
Have you taken a stand on that as well?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did indeed.
Good.
Aaron, I have a question from Aaron, then I have a question from Tracy, Tim, and Lisa. So Aaron.
Hi, Mayor Janey. Thanks for joining us again. My question is around the potential requirement or mandates for public workers to get vaccinated. I know I've seen different officials coming on different sides, and I'm curious whether there's a possibility of that, and if it could differ by public facing or if there's the full authorization. But just wondering where that stands.
Yeah, so my strategy is to make sure that people have the information that they need to make informed decisions, that they have access to the vaccine and equitable access at that we're meeting people where they are, and that they have time off to get the vaccine. I am not for
mandating the vaccine. I want to make it as available as possible, get the information out there, certainly encourage people to get the vaccine. Ultimately, people have to make choices that they think are best for them. I certainly want to encourage people to get their information from trusted sources. I happen to trust the science and the data that I've seen. I got the vaccine as a Black woman who, had questions myself about whether I wanted to do this, given the history in this country. Ultimately, I got information, I got informed, I made a decision, and I do think it is important to get vaccinated. I think it is the best way that we can protect ourselves and our communities and our loved ones. But I do not believe that we should be mandating the vaccine, and certainly not at this time. I, again, want to make sure that we all can get it and have the information. I don't want to see what is playing out in other parts of the world ever happen here. But my hope is that people will make the decision that is best for them and ultimately choose to get it. I can take another question before I have to run.
Yeah, if you want, if I'll combine the three questions.
That would be great. That would be great.
Tracy, this question is, Governor Baker says that the state will be closing the 4 mass vaccination sites by the end of June. Will more of the vaccinations be put into local pharmacies, health centers, and hospitals to make up for that gap? A question from Tim about what you would do to address the low high school graduation rates of young Black and brown men of color in BPS. And a question from Lisa Graff about a fully elected school committee.
Great. I will, so it was about closing the vaccines.
Yeah, but whether
Graduation
some of that will go to like health centers and hospitals.
So on the vaccines, just since we were talking about vaccines, again, I want to make sure that the vaccine is readily available and that everyone who wants one can get one. Reggie Lewis will not be closing anytime soon when those mass sites close. We're going to keep Reggie Lewis up and running. And what I have seen as a success is really doing the 4-pronged approach. So that includes mass vaccination sites. It includes priority clinics for priority groups, and it includes community clinics, as well as the mobile teams. And the mobile teams have been really important in terms of meeting folks where they are. So we will continue to make sure that the vaccine is available to everyone who wants it in Boston. In terms of graduation rates, we have seen record number of graduation of students, but we know that there are gaps when we peel back and look at issues around gender and race. Certainly when it comes to Black male students, and I would include Latino students in that, Black Latino students, it is important that we continue to support our students, particularly now. This pandemic has really devastated all of us, our communities, but it has had a particularly played a difficult role in our schools as our classrooms and buildings have not been open and kids were learning remotely. We know that remote learning cannot take the place of being in the classroom with your friends or with your teachers. And so there are going to be some learning gaps that we're going to have to address. There are issues around social, emotional wellness with our students who were not able to kind of connect with their friends and folks who care about them, their teachers, their mentors, their guidance counselors in a way that they were used to, their coaches in a way that they were used to before. And so, moving forward as we gear up, certainly in the next couple of weeks when our high school students come back, there's got to be an approach that really engages them, welcomes them, wraps our arms around them, and beyond this school year into the summer, with summer opportunities that help our students learn and earn and get ready for the fall. There are investments that we have made in terms of our schools and in terms of summer opportunities, including $1 million into green jobs, as well as 5,000 of the summer jobs and 1,000 year-round jobs. but we also have to make sure that the learning opportunities continue and that we are partnering with our different cultural institutions, our medical institutions, our institutions of higher ed, and that they are doing more to support our young people. In terms of the school governance and the school committee, I believe in a hybrid model. I've been on the record with that for a number of years now, and I believe in the hybrid because this current structure leaves, I think, it lacks that accountability that parents want to see in terms of hearing their voices. As someone who has gone to hundreds and hundreds of school committee meetings, potentially thousands over in my career, I've seen all of the ways that decisions have been made and seemingly without hearing from the parents who are there. It's not that the parents aren't there testifying. And so I do believe that we have to look at the structure of our school committee and that there should be greater accountability for parents and for young people. I believe that our youth members, that it should be more than one. I think our youth members should be voting members. Right now, they don't. Well, it's one person and the one rep does not have the ability to vote. But I also believe that there should be direct accountability to the mayor. And I believe that before I became the mayor. So this is not something new because I am the mayor. And I believe that is important because of the budget. And so I think a hybrid approach is what we should be thinking about. Obviously, any kind of change, I would hope that there would be a robust process to kind of think about what that model would look like. And ultimately, this would be a change to the charter and would require a ballot question. But before we wrap up, if it's okay, I'd just like to thank everyone. I don't really see, I think maybe you guys have me spotlighted. I can't really see who's on here, but I certainly appreciate the opportunity to connect with you all again. Hopefully we'll be able to do it in the near future where we're not necessarily doing it on Zooms. I'm sure I'm going to see you out there, Jonathan, in the streets, doing the work that you do come election time. And I just appreciate the opportunity to see and connect with you guys. Ward 4, as you already know, I am very fond of you. You do incredible work in terms of engaging residents and issues that matter across the city, not just in Ward 4. And I'm really grateful for all that you do and for the opportunity to be with you this evening. And certainly hope to earn your endorsement and ultimately your votes this fall. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining. I see Kirby put information in the chat. And can we get a round of applause for our speaker?
Yeah. MayorJaney.com. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
And then I have our next speaker, Councilor Julia Mejia. Julia, if you're here, I'll put you on spotlight.
Oh, I've been here. I've been waiting for my turn patiently.
I put the wrong Julia in spotlight. Sorry.
Oh, Julia, give me my shine. I've been here too long waiting. Okay?
I'm sorry.
Julia, step to the side and let me lead.
Sometimes people text me when they mean to text you.
Well, just forward them over to me and I'll handle those.
Oh, I will.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm happy to be here.
Take it away. Talk a little bit for a bit and then Q&A.
Absolutely. My name is Julia Mejia. I am a first-term city councilor at large. We won our election by 1 vote in 2019. It was a very traumatic situation. For those who were following, know that that 1 vote victory, everyone claims it as theirs, and so I give them that. It was your votes. If you voted for me, you could claim it, okay? And we ran a campaign dedicated to ensuring that the voices of those who have not been engaged in the process really get excited about politics. And we we're able to do that with the support of Ward 4. So I just wanted to say thank you so very much for your support in 2019. And I'm really excited to be here with you all to share a little bit about what we've done over the last 15 months since we've been in office. I like to say that I have like a growth mindset. I believe, you know, I'm a long life learner and every day I'm learning something new. I walked into city council thinking that I was going to change everything about everything. And then I only realized that there was just so much power that I had to change anything. So my first year, we had to learn how to adjust. We didn't even get comfortable in our seats and COVID hit. So we had to do most of our work in a remote environment. So taking my entire team remotely and really focusing on COVID gave us an opportunity to be innovative. And I think that, you know, I always talk about how COVID, no matter how bad it was, that it really presented itself as an opportunity for us to think outside the box, for us to shed light on the things that we already knew, and then to really create opportunities for people to be in community, which we normally don't do. And so I think our office really responded in a like, where is this gonna take us and how can we lead that work in ways that felt comfortable to everyone. So I'll just give you a quick overview. I mean, for those who don't know my story, I don't want to go too much into that because I want to spend time answering your questions and I want to show off all the work that we've done. So I'm not going to give you my long history bio, but I grew up in the city of Boston. I'm the first in my family to graduate high school, go on to college. I'm a single mom. I was raised by a single mom. I'm an immigrant to this country. And I'm a fierce fighter. And for those who know me, you know, if you're following me, you know I got something to say about just everything. And if I don't say it, my nonverbals will. So I'm very animated and I wear the truth out loud. And so I think that what you see is what you get with me. And I love my job. I really, really love my job. I think that the way we see our office is through, I say 4 different avenues. It's either when a constituent calls our office, I feel like Elizabeth Warren, we got a plan for everything. So we either address these issues through a program, we partner up with other nonprofit organizations and help create innovative ways to tackle these issues. For example, we created the Bodega Project, which was an initiative to help support and provide culturally responsive foods to individuals who were feeling food insecure and the onset of COVID. And we did so by also supporting our small businesses. We partnered up with different nonprofit organizations and we were able to help. We raised close to over $450,000 through our COVID relief efforts to support our small businesses and then our families in need. So we did a lot of programming. We're gonna send you our 87-page point power presentation because we do have 87 pages of amazing things that we've done and I don't want to go too much into detail, so I'll be sure that you get that. We'll have it dropped in the chat. The other way that we respond to our constituents is to protocols and procedures, right? So there are certain things that you could just pick up the phone and call the BHA and connect them with a constituent that's dealing with an issue. For example, we do these things called the pop-up lives on Instagram, and I've become a little bit addicted to them because it gives me an opportunity to connect with constituents. And we connected with a young woman who is a BHA recipient, basically that she just has a housing voucher. And she was a student that had graduated high school and was afraid of putting her mother's lease at risk because she had already turned 18. So through that conversation, we created an opportunity to talk to BHA and to figure out what are some of the policies and protocols and procedures that are in place that can help alleviate this situation. So sometimes it doesn't require having to go on Twitter and fighting with somebody or writing an ordinance or a public, hearing. It's just something, let's just revise the way we do business and figure out how we can support families. And then the other piece of our work, the other P, is through policy. We believe a lot of the work that we've been doing in our office is about bringing the people into these conversations. So a lot of the policies that we've led on have been in collaboration with our community residents. So we have a people policy led lens, which is what I said when I was campaigning, that I was going to bring the people into this work. And we've been really adamant about how we do business in the city of Boston. And so I can tell you a little bit about some of the ordinances that we recently passed. We passed the law, y'all, in like our first 14 or 15 months. I don't know if anyone has ever been able to do that, but I'm going to claim it as like, I don't know anybody else who's been able to do that. And I'm sure there probably is someone, but we were just incredibly proud because policy, we walked in to the office knowing that we were really passionate and we were fierce and all about, being fearless around advocacy and being an activist. And policy was an area of growth for us. But just to be able to say that we have managed to pass our first ordinance, which is on residential kitchens, to help support small entrepreneurs so that they can be able to sell baked goods and be able to generate income. And you might not think that it's a big deal, but if you're a parent and you have children, you can actually, I see it as a violence prevention strategy and also as a way to build revenue. So you can watch your kids and do your cooking, but you could also get some money into to help supplement your income. So I'm trying to tackle things from looking at all of the ills that are happening in our neighborhood and trying to figure out ways that we can do these small little things that will impact people's lives in the here and now. We also passed the Civilian Review Board ordinance that we filed alongside Councilor Campbell and Councilor Arroyo. And in those efforts, our focus was really aimed at making sure that we had young people who are going to be representative in that Civilian Review Board, and that position gets paid for. And most recently, we filed a home rule petition to lower the voting age. For those who follow me, you know that young people are my heart. I absolutely love them. And I believe I don't say that they are our future, they are our now. And we need to be doing everything in our powers to be able to support them develop their leadership capacity now. And the other big ticket item that we're working on right now is our language access ordinance, which is going to address what we have been hearing in terms of translation and interpretation. But we think it's not just about having access to language interpretation, but I see it as information justice. And as a result of those conversations that we've had with folks, we now filed an ordinance to have a literacy task force in the city of Boston. Literacy is an issue that I talk a lot about because my mom did not make it beyond 3rd grade. And, she struggled. And I also know that there are a lot of young people right now, a lot of students, particularly from the McKinley schools, who end up in DYS and they're struggling with being able to read and write. And now they're 18 years old. And so if we're really serious about dismantling the school to prison pipeline, we really want to look at this issue from that perspective. And if we want to really address the violence in our community, then we also need to realize that a lot of our returning citizens are struggling to read and write. And so filling out a job application may be difficult, right? So these are the sort of small things that we believe that we can do to change the way that we literally do business in Boston. So I don't want to keep on talking because I'm here to answer questions.
Here, I'm telling the chat, this will be one that I'm sure you have thoughts on, so I thought it'd be a good question to lead off. So one thing that's happened during COVID is that people have been that the remote participation in meetings has been able to allow people who may not have been able to attend meetings in person, the ability to participate. What are your thoughts about how we can better incorporate that or other ways of kind of expanding who can participate in hearings and community meetings on the other side of COVID?
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. So, one of the things that I used to say that I was going to host a hearing on public hearings because they were not accessible to everybody. And COVID made it so much easier for us to not just do that, but we filed an ordinance alongside Councilor Edwards and Breeden on digital democracy, like making sure that we continue to be able to meet via Zoom and that we are able to have access to be able to continue our public hearings. But I want to also just think a little bit further beyond that, and just making sure that we're being super mindful that not everybody has access to the internet, and that we need to be able to create a model where that people can still continue to participate, because we don't want to go all online and realize that we're not creating space for everybody to participate. So we need to be able to figure out what that looks like. And then I know this sounds a little bit crazy, but our office this weekend, we're going to be kicking off these community budget hearing tours where we're going to be going to hair salons and barbershops, because if we're serious about engaging people, we literally have to bring the city into the community, and not always expect people to come to us. So I think for our civic and community engagement, we really want to be super mindful of not just digitalizing everything and leaving people out. So being really intentional about when, where, what time we're hosting hearings, and making sure that we're removing all barriers, because eventually we're all going to be back in person, right? And what does that look like, and building that infrastructure where we can still have these hybrid models.
This helps dovetail well with the question from Ben and Jane that I have sent to me in the chat is, one thing that COVID has spotlighted is the digital inequities that exist in the city, like that we've seen particularly with BPS and on broadband access. What can the city do to ensure universal broadband access so that we can help tackle that digital divide?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that I find so interesting, right? Where you see Wi-Fi, it's usually in the touristy areas, downtown, Faneuil Hall, and then sporadically you might see it in more residential areas. I think that digital Wi-Fi needs to be across the entire city, and it should be free for everybody. It should be a public good, and we should be able to figure out how we're going to get those funds to cover it. And then I also think that we also need to do a better job at educating people. There's a privilege here that we don't realize, how to even use Zoom. And I think that the city has an opportunity to really think about what does internet education looks like for people who haven't been so savvy with it. Because there's some people who have smartphones and all they do is WhatsApp, right? And they know how to do Facebook, and they know, but they don't need, they don't know how to utilize all of these other apps that can help alleviate a lot of the stressors that they face. And I think that the city, in terms of their education, has an opportunity to also add that to their broadband initiatives. It's not just about access, but it's also making sure that people understand how to utilize the internet. I mean, you might think it's 20 something years, well, maybe 30 years since the internet. I don't know how long the internet's been around for a long time, but there's still a lot of people who still don't know how to utilize all of these apps. So I just think that there's a role that the city can play there. And I want to know what Margaret was eating while Kim was chomping. Margaret, I just want you to know I caught you eating. So I just want to put you out there. You were not paying attention. I'm just joking.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks, Julia. That was to be pointed out. I really appreciate it. I'll get you back. I'll get you back.
I was just teasing. I just want to bring a little bit of humor into the space, right? Because
it was a piece of fruit, though, I want you to know.
Yeah, no, I'm just teasing. I just want to bring a little bit of humor into this. But go ahead.
We've talked about this, but the Human Rights Commission is having a hearing with all the providers, Comcast, Verizon, Sterry, on the 19th.
Yep.
Public hearing. So on just what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I
talked about this before. So
yeah, and Margaret will tell you that I was one of the biggest mouths in that area too, and so I'm really happy to champion that.
Yeah, you've been a real advocate. So
yeah,
awesome, thank you. Have a question in the chat from Elisa about just asking what the residential kitchen ordinance that you were speaking about, what does it say?
Yeah.
What are the key points of that?
Yeah, so the key points of that, so we worked in partnership with a lot of the folks who are trying to push, because right now, here's the deal. There are people who right now who have been operating illegally from their homes, right? So what the residential kitchen does is just makes it legal for people to be able to bake, to sell baked goods or teas, things that don't require any specific room temperature. And so that they can build these businesses and incubate in their homes, but they can't sell the product from their home. They can sell it to a store, they can sell it online, but they can't open up, their living room and say, hey, come have a croissant and sit in my living room. No, that's not part of the ordinance, right? You can only make up to $25,000 a year. You have to get food safe certified and go through the ISD process to get your home inspected before you can get a permit. And the permit only costs about $100 to be able to institute. And the reason why we did this is because we saw during COVID, there was a need and an opportunity also for people to be able to have access to culturally competent foods right in their own neighborhoods.
Awesome, thank you. And then I see a question from Carol asking about, can you give us some highlights about some of your work on environmental issues in the city?
Of course, Carol had to ask me the tough questions. Everybody knows that I'm green on the green space situation, right? So this is where I feel like our office has really, the way we think about environmental issues is always with a racial justice lens, right? So we know there are a lot of people in our community, while there might be beautiful parks, we don't feel safe using these parks, right? And so we tackle these realities from a let's educate people about the importance of having access to green space. And let's talk about the violence that exists and the trauma that we're experiencing in our neighborhoods and how all of these two things can help alleviate that, right? So that's kind of the way that I talk a lot about environmental issues in our office. We also hosted a late night tea with Councilor Wu a few months ago so that we can look at having late night workers and third shift workers being able to ride the T after hours, right? Because those Uber are expensive and now Ubers are just doing Uber Eats. So there aren't any even Ubers or Lyfts anymore anyways, but we're really trying to tackle that from that perspective. And then there's been a lot of discussion more so recently here in American Legion Highway because of the new bike lanes. And there was a lot of tension in the community about why all of these bicyclists, now they're trying to take over. And it really, our role and what our office always, the role that we seem to always play is like the convener, helping people understand the why, so that people don't feel like these things are being done to them and helping them understand the broader movement around environmental justice issues. And then the last thing that I'll say in regards to our work in the environmental space is I have recently joined Madison Park as an advisory board member. I'm going to be helping them on just how to build their marketing because they don't get a lot of love. And I think that there is an opportunity there in terms of building green and really pushing to have young people have more jobs in the green space so that we can, raise the next generation of green builders.
Awesome. Any other questions that folks have?
Okay, so I'm I have expectations here. I stopped talking as much as I did because I didn't.
I can go to one that was up a little bit more in the chat from Ben and Jane. So one issue that's especially salient in the South End is the opioid crisis because of the way in which the intersection of Mass Avenue and Rolnia Cass Boulevard is kind of an epicenter of the opioid crisis in the city. What are some things that you would want to advocate for on the council for how we can address the opioid crisis in the city, as well as kind of its connection to homelessness?
Yeah, so, I'm the chair of small business and workforce development. And so what I'm always trying to figure out is what is my lane in every space that I get invited into, right? So how could I talk about this conversation within the context of whatever little power I have, right? So if I'm going to host a hearing around the opioid crisis in Mass and Cass, I could do it through small businesses and work with the small businesses so that I can move the work forward. One of the things that I do see though, and I think that this is probably something that's very true to our office. I don't know if you guys remember the fireworks situation. I took care of those, right? I don't know if you watched the news, but I took care of those fireworks. I shut them down. And we did that through a community-centered approach where we brought people, some who felt like we needed to call the police to deal with the issue, and some folks that wanted to think creatively of how we could do this in a way that's of a more community-centered approach. And so we hosted a town hall. And through that process, we created a blueprint for what it looks like when we bring people together across their differences, across experiences, to be able to come up with viable solutions, right? And so I think that that similar approach from a citywide perspective is what is needed when we're thinking about the opioid crisis and mass and cast. Because right now, you know, it's always the district councilors that represent that area and the at large. I believe that we need to be all in, and that includes all 13 councilors having the same conversation around an issue that is impacting everyone in the city of Boston. And I think that with that approach, we might be able to really move the needle because then everybody feels a sense of responsibility for what is happening. So I think that that is something that I'd like to see in terms of addressing it from the council's perspective. And then I also see the tension with those who are unhoused and those who are living the realities and those who are experiencing the realities, right? And there's a lot of tension between these two groups. And I think if we could convene and have one conversation around what it's going to take to address this issue in a way that people don't feel overburdened, then I think that that will help address some of the concerns. But I do think, and the last thing that I'll say about this is that, you know, communities of color, oftentimes, you know, we bear the brunt of this issue. And I think that, you know, while I support safe consumption sites, I think that we really need to be really super mindful of making sure that it's shared and that it's not in one concentrated area. And I think that that is something that is important for us to look at as we continue to address this problem. And then the last thing I'll say, I might keep saying the last thing, I keep saying more for someone who didn't think they had much to say. There needs to be accountability. I think, you know, one of the things that we filed and we've been pushing for, and everybody knows this, you know, when who is, I don't know, there's something background, sorry about that. One thing that in our first budget, you know, we were pushing to reallocate resources from the police department's budget to help support mental health and wellness and violence prevention. I believe getting at the root cause of the situation as opposed to criminalizing those who are already experiencing hardships, right? So I think that that approach in mass and cast is also something that we need to look at, is the how we deal with the situation. And I think we need to be a little bit more compassionate. I don't know. But we need to be aggressive. We need to be aggressively compassionate. How about that?
And any other questions that folks have? So I know there was one earlier from Ben and Jane Siegel about the issue of how the city is heavily relying on property taxes to fund the revenue stream, and thoughts about other sources of revenue for the city to help diversify and also expand city revenue so that we're able to do all the things that we'd like to be able to do in the city.
I was reading the chat. Sorry. So about the property and taxes. And
yeah. So currently the revenue for the city is just heavily reliant on property taxes. And what are other sources of income that you can think of to equitably raise money for the city in a way that enables us to do what we want to do, but without being so incredibly dependent on one source?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. You know, our Councilor Bach is the chair of Ways and Means. I'm sure she would have lots of great answers for you. We're right now, I think we need to focus on those pilot payments too, because we see a lot of these big institutions are not paying their fair share. So as a city, we need to make sure that we're holding them accountable to that. And then I think we also must be intentional in keeping an eye towards the CARES Act funding that we're going to be receiving from the federal government, and making sure that the community is also has a voice in how those dollars are going to get allocated. And then I think that we need to expand, you know, when we're thinking about the luxury tax and supporting, you know, I support the fair share amendment at the state level. And then finally, I support Councilor Edwards' ordinance in creating accountability measures around the pilot payments, which is what I mentioned earlier. I think that those are real viable ways for ways to increase our revenue. And then I also think that anybody who's doing business in the city of Boston needs to literally do business in the city of Boston. and we need to figure out how we can incentivize them to pay their fair share too. I just don't think it's just institutions. I think that there are oh my God, I don't even know. This is being recorded and I'm saying this for the first time. So I'm sure somebody will yell at me, but I think about Fidelity, I think about all of these businesses and all these big corporations that are literally, thriving in the city of Boston, and what are their investments to the community? And how can we tap into those dollars? I don't know. I think we need to be more creative and not just put the burden on the people of Boston, but we need to look at how we're incentivizing those who are doing business here as well.
Great, thank you. And I think I'll give you one more. We have time for one more question in the chat. This is from Elisa, who was talking about you mentioned that you'll be on the board of Madison Park, and asking about working to help make it a dynamic vocation. How can you help make it one of the best vocational schools in the country?
Yes, so I grew up in Boston, right? So everybody knows I went to Dorchester High when it was still Dorchester High and nobody wanted to go there. And I think, Ben, you asked a question earlier, and I think it was you, Ben, I forget, I was listening, and I think you talked about these exam schools and how everybody's like, oh, the exam schools. I didn't go to one and I did okay. I think we spend so much of our energy supporting exam schools and we forget, and I think oftentimes kids like me felt like we were the stepchilds of the public school system because no one really cared about us. And Madison now, and in many ways, is becoming that school, right? I feel like Madison and Brighton High, there are a lot of schools right now who are under-resourced and undervalued. And I wouldn't say that they're failing because they're not failing. The system is failing them. Those schools are not failing. We need to change the narrative around that. And so I think that's one of the things that I'm doing with Madison Park. I'm volunteering on their advisory board. I'm helping them with their marketing. We want families to want to choose Madison Park. We want families to see, wow, you could make 3 times more just by going to this Voc Tech and getting this particular skill. Helping families see that as a viable option, because we should not be shipping our kids out. People go like in Worcester, there's long lines, waiting lists just to get into those Voc Techs. In Boston, we're dying to bring our kids in. So I think that we need to own it and we need to invest. And I think that Madison is a gem and we have an opportunity to really put it, it should be a world-class type of Voc Tech school, and we need to be committed to that. And that's the work that I'm doing, is to help them do just that. Right now, we're going to be working with them collaboratively. Carol, you don't know this, but I'm gonna put you to work too. They do graphics. They have a media arts. They have cosmetology. The cosmetology school, those students should be working with the Hill Holiday, the advertising agency. Whenever they're doing a commercial, they should book the students from Madison Park to do the makeup. They should be working with our students to print out the graphics. Like, we need to invest in these programs. And so that's what I'm going to be doing, is helping them do that, because I'm looking at Madison though through my workforce development hat, because I figure that I'm changing the conversation. Even though I lived in the education space, I'm going to reclaim it, and I'm going to move Madison Park and all the work that I do under my workforce development, because I'm the chair of workforce development, so that I can move things differently and help that school. And are you open to all high schools becoming inclusion schools and BPS? Yes, I'm open to that, Lisa. And I also, you didn't ask me, but I'll tell you anyways, I supported a fully elected school board. I believe as a BPS graduate who grew up here, and seeing all of the shenanigans that have happened over the last 10 to 15 years, it's embarrassing that Boston is the only district in the Commonwealth that has an appointed school board. And that, for me, from a civil rights issue, is a concern, because what we're doing is we're denying people the opportunity to elect the people that should represent them. And so that is why I support a fully elected school board.
since there's only one more question in the chat, I'll let us do that even though we're slightly over time, but quickly, this is a question from Tracy about how can we have about how to make sure that developers build more on-site affordable housing in Fenway as opposed to making it off-site as they often try to do.
Oh yeah, so so you'll be happy to hear that we recently hosted a planning and development town hall, and we also hosted a hearing on impact advisory groups. And what we hope to do from there is we're going to be creating a citywide community engagement Bill of Rights, if you will, of standards of how we build across the city of Boston from a community-centered approach. And I think that is going to, really push on developers to ensure that they're building on site and not just saying we're going to take that IDP or maybe we'll build in the Seaport, but there will be no affordable housing units in the Seaport. We'll defer those dollars to help build in Mattapan. My hope is through this steering committee that we're gonna be able to come up with some standards that will shut that down.
Thank you.
Well, I think that we have a few minutes left for committee business, but I want to thank you so much.
Wait, let me say thank you.
Yeah.
Let me say bye.
Yeah, no, I was going to hand it over I'm going to thank you for being here. And then say, if people want to learn more about how to get involved with their campaign or your campaign, where should they go? How should they connect?
Yes, hold on. I got to put all that in my chat. Where's my team? I got a team. So thank you so much for inviting me. I wish I was not the last one because I feel like all your energy, by the time you get to me, I'm y'all like ready to go to sleep.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm just so incredibly grateful to have the opportunity to be here. I appreciate your support in this year's election. I feel like there's so much unfinished business. And because I have a growth mindset, as I mentioned earlier, I have learned so much this year. And I believe that everything that we've learned this year is just going to make us stronger for year two. And so I hope that that you believe that I have what it takes to take the work to another level. And I hope that you consider me voting for me because you get 4 votes for at large. And then I also hope that you consider supporting me. And thank you so much for all your questions and allowing me to be here with you today.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Okay, then I'll leave.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put my information here and then I'll leave so y'all can talk about me, okay?
Yeah, turn around so that we can talk about you behind your back. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I know that's a challenge.